Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Sid Alpha, and I know this review is a little late, and for that I do apologize. I did take a week off of work to play this particular game, and then I had to review the dozens of hours of footage, and I had to analyze everything in order to form a cogent opinion. However, at long last, I feel I'm ready to put pen to paper, as it were, and I felt it important to do so because of the massive controversy this game is embroiled in and the severely mixed impressions being put out into the world. Also, please bear in mind that this review will contain spoilers, so here it is, finally, my review of Mass Effect Andromeda.
Tempest, we're going in.
And before I get started with the core mechanics of the game, I do feel it appropriate to acknowledge the controversies that have surrounded this particular title. It all started with the racist tweets and standpoints of one of the lead developers on the Andromeda project, Manveer Hare. One only need to spend 30 seconds looking at his Twitter profile in order to verify his blatant prejudice against white people. Now, many people have refused to purchase Andromeda as a form of protest against Manveer Hare's racism. Indeed, many more people were calling for Hare's dismissal from BioWare, or at very least the Andromeda project. Now, BioWare did stand by their employee, and Hare remained a project lead. However, it is worth noting that Hare, in fact, does no longer work for BioWare, and it seems this was due to his only being part of the team for Andromeda as a contractual obligation, and he is gone on to do his own thing. However, in several instances, Andromeda's design choices struck most gamers as being exceptionally odd, and many attribute this to Hare's influence, such as the exceptionally substandard rendering of females within Andromeda when compared to their male counterparts. This, quote, desexualization of female characters has not been commented on by BioWare despite the furor that it caused, whereas the male avatars look nearly identical to the real-life models they were based on. Now, in addition to that, there is the fact that the custom character generator has no option for a Caucasian persona. If one wishes to play a white person, one must use the presets, which in this case of the female writer are absolutely substandard. Now, many have attributed this directly to Hare and his clear anti-white sentiment, but that is yet to be confirmed. Then there was the wave of verbal attacks on the EA mocap artist who had apparently lied on her Twitter bio and stated that she was lead animations artist for Andromeda. Now, I myself posted a video decrying these attacks regardless whether the woman was telling the truth or not. No one person should be attacked in such a despicable and armchair warrior of a fashion. The term internet strong came to mind in regards to many of these postings. However, in spite of all this, I felt obliged to still play through the game in order to produce a review for you all. Now, I had already covered my first impressions during the trial period of the game that unlocked 10 hours of gameplay 5 days early, but that was barely scratching the surface. Now, Mass Effect Andromeda takes place some 600-odd years in the future from the events of Mass Effect 3, having taken that long to travel the intervening distance between galaxies. Your character, Ryder, awakens from cryosleep mere minutes before the Hyperion, the ark that carries the majority of the human colonists, strikes a massive unknown phenomenon, causing a fair amount of damage to the ship. Now, it is fairly early on here that we notice that the facial animations are clearly substandard. They seem blank in many cases and grossly over-exaggerated in others. Now, this shows that the game was clearly rushed, and due to BioWare's loss of 13 lead devs in relatively short order, speaks to severely troubled waters at BioWare and a seemingly extremely aggressive and heavy-handed upper management. Also, the game primarily developed by BioWare Montreal, who is very much BioWare's B team, seemed to be needing much more support from the Edmonton team in order to get the game to the finish line. Now, the first mission has your Ryder on a mission with your father, whom ends up dying at the end of it. This lackluster storytelling and not providing a clear enough backstory led me to not really care that it happened. Meanwhile, the Ryder character is apparently deeply affected by all of this, but the player isn't given any real reason to care whatsoever. Now, this initial mission introduces us to the game's primary enemy, the Kett, a literally boneheaded race of people that all seem to be completely identical to each other. Now, you also find during that initial mission a giant technological structure of immense power that you do find out later on are giant terraforming machines that are put there by an ancient race that made the, quote, Golden Worlds. These Golden Worlds are now all but apparently nearly unlivable. Now, with your father's death, you are linked to Sam, the Hyperion's AI, and are promoted to the title of Pathfinder, which is this new game's title for what amounts essentially to Spectre. And you are tasked with finding worlds and locations to put down outposts and solve problems in order to make the areas more livable. Through the course of the game, you do meet another alien race, the Angara, a race of people that sort of actually look reminiscent to a combination between a Prothean and an amphibian. These people will, for the most part, become staunch allies for the initiative if you play your cards right. Now, you also uncover these ancient terraforming machines on each world, and part of your task is to bring them all online, fighting Ket and Remnant machines the whole way in a race against the Ket to uncover the secrets of the Remnant technology. Now, I'm intentionally leaving a lot of the story out here, but my takeaways from the story is that while it's not bad, it's certainly not great. The storytelling is a bit disjointed and just not up to par with what we've seen from previous Mass Effect titles. It does its job well enough to keep you somewhat engaged, but it lacks that drive, that passion and uniqueness that the original trilogy had. Now, in addition to that, the interactions with the secondary characters were an exceptionally weak point within the story. They all had either irritatingly boring personalities like Liam, or were extremely trope-heavy like the Turian Han Solo veteran Nix. So I could harp on the story and the characters all day long, but truth be told, even while they pale in comparison to the original Mass Effect characters and story arc, it still wasn't a bad story when it's all said and done. The game did have moments where that pioneering and adventuring spirit managed to show through, but the main difficulty I have with it is that those moments are too few and far between. You could tell that the writers just weren't as experienced in relating emotion and adventure through the game as previous writers that we've seen, which is a real shame as BioWare games are mostly known for their story arcs. Now, they did do away with the Paragon and Renegade dialogue options, but they continued with the dreaded dialogue wheel that so many people hate. This time, they make use of tone choices where you have the emotional, logical, casual, and professional options. However, each of these choices does absolutely nothing to change or alter subsequent conversations with your companions, which is a significant departure from previous BioWare titles and makes the game's dialogue just that much more shallow. But what about the gameplay? Well, in that component, the game actually shines through a little more. The game still has a similar leveling system to previous Mass Effect games with the added profiles component. Sam, your AI, can integrate and enhance your character's abilities, which will allow you to develop soldier, biotic, and tech profiles that you can switch between at a moment's notice. Now, this allows for a much broader scope of skills and abilities that you have had in previous games. However, as with everything, there is a trade-off. You can spread out your XP between the three profiles, but this comes at the expense of not reaching as many Tier 6 or Mastery skills as one would get from concentrating on a single profile, at least on the initial playthrough. For my playthrough, I concentrated on Soldier, maxing it out completely, and I was still able to develop several biotic skills and tech skills as well. The customization of abilities was a very welcome addition to the game, and one that you can have a fair amount of fun with. Now, the combat feels surprisingly tight and well implemented. The automatic cover system took a little bit of getting used to, but the ability to manually shift point of view from left side to right side was a decent addition that added an element of depth to the combat that was simple yet effective, as was the addition of the jump jets. Now, these allowed for a verticality that just hasn't been present in previous BioWare games and added a depth to the combat system that many people, including myself, had felt was absent from previous games. Now, this was a very welcome addition and was implemented extremely well. Now, the game also has the Nomad, which is seemingly the civilian version of the Mako. It lacks guns of any kind, but I did find out that if you run people over, creatures over with it, you can cause damage to them, and that was actually kind of fun for a little while. The Nomad itself is customizable with increased maneuverability, scanning, shields, traction, and speed, but there's nothing really exceptional about it. Also, Mass Effect Andromeda is an open-world game. After the nearly 2-hour-long introductory sequence, you're dumped into Eos, which is one of the largest of the worlds that you end up spending time on. This actually feels much like the opening area in Dragon Age Inquisition, where the first area you're introduced to contains the lion's share of the content within the game. Eos isn't quite as bad as all that, but you still end up spending a ridiculous amount of time there. Also, the map system and open-world mechanics feel directly ripped from Inquisition and dumped into this game with a more tech-oriented skin. You deploy automated forward bases that act much the same way as camps do in the Inquisition. You use these to refill your life support, ammunition, and allow you to change out party members, and this also allows you to call them Nomad. Now, the game does also have a research and development system in order to unlock new weapons and armor. You earn points towards these by completing side quests and missions. You also earn research by scanning new technologies and new animals and plant life that you come across during your travels. Unfortunately, the UI for the game shows through, especially so in this case, just how clunky and ill-considered of a format it is. It is a chore to work through, and not just in the research and crafting areas, but even in the inventory and merchant screens, they're a pain to go through, and I found myself doing everything I could to avoid them, which is unfortunate as keeping up on your upgrades is crucial in some portions of the game. Also, it's worth mentioning that the transitions in this game will drive you absolutely insane. Every time you travel between systems, between planets, land, dock, or take off, there is a 24-second long animation that is completely unskippable. And before you ask, I checked resource utilization during these transitions, and I can confirm that these most certainly do not mask a loading sequence. I saw resource utilization actually drop during the animations, and I saw the loading sequence occur after the transitions. Now, these transition sequences really needed to be skippable, as you see them so often that I actually found myself dreading going on runs to complete side quests. Some quests require you to go from system to system just to run a scan. I would venture a guess that at minimum I spent 4 hours just staring at the same boring transitions. And don't get me wrong, they were cool the first few times, and they looked quite lovely, but they quickly lost their luster, and to expect a person to sit through the same animations so often was absolute cruelty. Now, the graphics of the game are a definite improvement over the previous titles, but not drastically so. The current engine doesn't show the same level of detail as other current AAA titles, but it's by no means what I would consider poor graphics. The game does have some beautifully done set pieces and vistas. The weapon animations and combat movements were all well crafted and look fantastic. In spite of so many other setbacks, I feel like I do want to see more of many of these worlds. They were beautifully designed, and I wish that we could visit more than just one small area of these planets. However, the game's graphics and core framework aren't without their issues. The game has a ton of bugs and glitches. Even though I didn't experience any hard crashes, I could still tell fairly quickly that this game needed another 6 months or so of development. Of course, in today's AAA market, these vast quantities of glitches and bugs are pretty much expected and unfortunately commonplace now, with many of them being fixed post-launch. Now, this is a deplorable state of standards by the AAA industry and one that should be condemned at every turn. Also, the game, while long, doesn't have much replay value, even with the tacked-on Horde mode-style multiplayer, which feels directly scooped out of Mass Effect 3. I played through every side quest and mission within the game, and my total playtime clocked in at 64 hours. However, without branching story arcs and dialogue trees, there really isn't any point in going back and playing the game again, except for me, I might just play as male Ryder just to see what the different dialogues are, if any. However, the vast majority of the side missions are dull and ultimately pointless once you get that particular planet up to 100% viability. Unfortunately, it's one of those instances where this game is far more shallow than any of the previous BioWare games that I've come across, and that's a real disappointment. Now, Mass Effect Andromeda isn't a bad game, not by a long shot, but compared to the other Mass Effect titles, it comes up far short in nearly every possible way. The only significant bonus to the game over previous titles was the jump jets, which provided the verticality to the combat system. Other than that, I think it's safe to say that this is the worst game in the Mass Effect series by a country mile. But it's still not a bad game. And this world has potential. I want to see more from these characters, but I want it to be from a more talented team. The Montreal team showed that they just aren't capable yet of handling intricate and in-depth story arcs and dialogues. But when it's all said and done, I'm not sorry I spent the money on Andromeda, and I would do so again. It's a good game, just not as good as previous titles. Now, all things considered, I would give this a 7 out of 10 by my metrics. Barely. Had it not been for the combat system being so well done, this game would have earned a 6 out of 10 without question. But I enjoyed jumping around and over obstacles, hovering in place to snipe kit that were hiding behind cover. It was simple, yet satisfying. But please tell me what you think about the game down in the comments below. And while you're at it, don't forget to like and share. Each time you do so, it raises the viability points of the channel, which we need to survive and to bring more reviews out of stasis. Also, please remember to subscribe if you're new. Every little bit helps, and if you want to support the channel even further, the link to my Patreon is up on your screen now, and there are links to it, as well as my Twitter and Facebook down in the description down below. Please do make use of them. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am Sid Alpha, and thank you for watching.